Tell me when.
We're live on YouTube, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Welcome everybody to the Alcohol and Gambling Licensing Subcommittee. The first item I need to have from the other two members of the subcommittee, do you have any direct declarations of interest, either of you? Sally?
None, Chair.
Tim, right.
None, Chair.
Thank you. So we come straight on. I've got on my agenda business, but nobody quite knows what that business is because we've dealt with all the other business so far. So we're now on to the main feature for this evening, the review of the premises license of Monopol. Martin, I think this is you, is it right?
Yes, Chair. I'll read the report and go from there.
Thank you very much. Would you like to start then?
Yes, the purpose of this report is to consider a request from Northamptonshire Police for a review of the premises licence for Monopol, which is a shop at 42A Barrack Road, Northampton. The review application was received on the 22nd of December 2020 and submitted in accordance with the licensing objectives for the prevention of crime and disorder. The current licence holder is a Mr. Mafbin Arasada, who I believe is here with us today. When a request for a review of the premises licence or club premises certificate is received, the licensing authority must display a notice at or near the premises and on the council's website. This gives responsible authorities and any other interested parties a 28-day period for the opportunity to make representations in relation to the review application. It is the responsibility of the applicant to serve a copy of the review application onto the licence holder and the responsible authorities. The local authority, excuse me, displayed the obligatory notice on the 22nd December 2020, and during the 28-day period, there have been no other representations. Having said that, trading standards have submitted evidence that the police have in turn presented as part of their submission. Attendance today is from PC Sandy Tracy and PC Dave Bryan, and also with us is Mr. Luke Elford and Mr. Zada, the holder of the licence. The premises licence number is PL0696. As I've said, Mr. Mafbin Arasada is the licence holder. The current DPS at Monopol is Mr. Shahu Rahman Abdullah. The premises is currently licensed as follows. For the off-sale of alcohol, it's licensed from Monday to Saturday between the hours of 9 and 2300 hours. On Sundays between 10 and 2200 hours, and bank holidays are the same as the Sunday hours, 10 till 2200 hours. Opening hours are very slightly longer in that the shop opens every day from 9 until midnight. 9 AM that is till midnight. Just a very brief history. Mr. Zada has been the licence holder at Monopol since July 2020. Prior to that, the current DPS, Mr. Abdullah, was the licence holder. At the end of the consultation period, the licensing authority must hold a hearing. It must take steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The steps the subcommittee can take are to modify the conditions of the licence, to exclude any licensable activity from the licence, to remove the designated premises supervisor, to suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, to revoke the licence, or to take no action. For those purposes, a condition of the licence is For those purposes, a condition of the licence is modified if any of them are altered or omitted, or new conditions are added. Policies for consideration include the Northampton Borough Council Statement of Licensing Policy, the Section 182 guidance under the Licensing Act 2003, particularly sections 11 and 13, which give it guidance for the determination of this application. And each application must be considered on its own merits. Do you want me to go through the contents of this report following on from this, or have you had a chance to go through it properly?
I have had a chance. Let me just ask the other two. Councillor Beardsworth, Councillor Larratt, have you both been able to read all the reports, all the papers we've had about this?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair, I've been through it.
Thank you very much. So Martin, we've read everything, so we followed everything. So if you would like to take us through what you would like us to do and what you'd like us to hear next, please.
Well, I think we ought to hear the submission from the police with regards to their case and why they're bringing this review, and then any other submissions they wish to make, followed by Mr. Elford or his or the person he's representing, Mr. Zada.
Thank you. So we need now to hear from PC Tracy. Is that correct?
She's the author of the review papers. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. PC Tracy, you're with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Would you like to state why you are bringing this forward then to us?
Okay, firstly, good evening. And we've got an echo in here, actually. Just bear with me just 1 second.
Sorry, we can't hear any of that. Could you start again somehow?
Yeah, just 1 minute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's fine so far.
Okay. So we act on behalf of the Chief Officer of Northampton Police, Mr. Adderley, and he's given us delegated responsibility and an authorisation for me to act on his behalf. So we've bought this review of the premises licence for Monopole, which is in Barrack Road, under the licensing objective of the prevention of crime and disorder. The review relates to the offences of sale of non-duty paid tobacco, knowingly allowing or carrying on or attempting to carry on unauthorised licensable activity, and the employment of illegal workers. As you've all had sight of the paperwork, I don't feel any need to go through it bit by bit. If you'd like me to read out my statement, I'm more than happy to do that, as I think it incorporates everything that we've done. And then what I'll do is explain to you afterwards the partnership working that we've done with Mr. Elford and the current premises licence holder. And we have
with Mr.
Then obviously the overall decision is yours as to the outcome.
Yeah, fine. Thank you very much. Well, we have loads of papers here. Could I just ask Councillor Bearsworth and Councillor Larratt, is there anything you particularly feel that PC Tracy should be telling us, talking to us about? If you've had as many papers as I have and you've read them the way I have, you probably won't, but please, one of you could say if you want to hear anything particular from PC Tracy.
Chair, I would particularly like to hear her statement, because I think it's interesting to know what sort of reaction she's had working with the licence holder and the solicitor.
Okay, Councillor Larratt?
I concur with Sally on that, Chair.
Fine. Thank you very much. There we are, PC Tracy. We need your statement, please.
Okay, this statement relates to an investigation I was involved in whereby I was sold cigarettes that had not had UK duty tax paid on a number of separate test purchases exercises, and I had an illegal sale of alcohol made to me on one of these occasions. So I'm a constable with 26 years policing experience. For 24 of these years, I've served within the London's Metropolitan Police, and I've worked on Central London's clubs, vice and licensing teams for the last 9 years of my Met service before transferring up to Northamptonshire Police in 2018. I became a licensing officer for Northampton Police earlier this year, and as part of my current role, I'm responsible for ensuring that all licensed premises within our county adhere to and support the licensing objectives and trade within the confines of British law. On Thursday, the 29th of October 2020, I was on duty in plain clothes as part of my role as a licensing PC for Northamptonshire Police. I was in the company of my colleague Dave Bryan. At about midday, I attended UK Monopole convenience store, which is 42A Barrack Road, Northampton. We had received information that the premises were selling illegally sourced cigarettes that had not had UK duty paid a tax paid on them. I was tasked to conduct a test purchase on the shop. I entered the shop just before midday. There was a male shopkeeper present and another member of staff, but no other customers in the proximity of the till area. So I asked the male behind the counter whether he had any cheap cigarettes. He told me that he did, and he asked me what I wanted. So I asked him whether he sold Regal cigarettes. He spoke in a foreign language that sounded Arabic or something into something behind the counter that I couldn't actually see. It was possibly a walkie-talkie radio or a microphone type gadget. He told me that he could give me 20 cigarettes for £5. So I said that that was fine. And he spoke into his language, into whatever was behind the counter. So I paid him a £10 note and he gave me £5 change. Stepped to the side and I waited and watched what was happening. The male who had served me walked towards the rear of the shop, towards the right-hand far corner. And in that corner was a doorway with a long dark green fabric curtain covering it. I heard a noise. It was a swishing noise. Something was coming down a chute or a slide and then a thud. And this noise came from the rear of the shop. There were no customers close to me and there was no music or traffic noise. I could hear this sound and the thud clearly. The male then came back with a dark coloured packet of Regal cigarettes in his hand, which he gave to me, and I thanked him and left the store. Made my way back to my colleague who was sat waiting in the car outside. So that packet he handed me was a 20 packet of Regal cigarettes with a dark brown, grey and white packaging with a picture of a male without a top on with a large scar across his chest. It had English writing on it, but it had no UK duty paid stamp or anything that would inform me that the duty had been paid. That is exhibited, those cigarettes is SAT/1. I would say I was in the store no longer than 3 minutes, and there was another staff member present while I was served, but he was stacking shelves. There was one other customer in the shop, and as I entered before me, but I didn't see where she went. I had a clear and unobstructed view of the shopkeeper, but I couldn't see whereabouts from the rear of the store the cigarettes were bought up from, due to the rear of it being obscured by the green curtain. When he sold me the cigarettes, there was about 3 meters between us, and I'd never seen the male before, but I would recognize him again. I'm fairly confident that the noise I heard were the cigarettes that I'd been bought, and they'd been placed in possibly a chute from the flat above the shop and passed down to the ground floor. I would describe the male behind the counter as a light-skinned Arabic male, aged in his mid to late 20s, of medium build, and he had short black hair and was clean shaven. He was wearing a black top and blue jeans, and he wasn't wearing a name badge, and he spoke with an accent that I thought sounded Arabic. Then a few days later, on the 10th, Tuesday the 10th of November, myself and PC Brian, we went back to the same shop to conduct a second test purchase operation. We arrived at the shop at about 1:30 in the afternoon, and PC Brian waited outside in the car again. I went inside where there were 2 people in the queue in front of me. No masks were being worn by anyone in the shop other than myself, and there was no screen up between the sales assistant and the customers on the counter. I felt very uncomfortable by this due to the current COVID pandemic. I waited 2 meters away to be served, and the male in front of me asked for 2 packets of Richmond cigarettes. He was an Arabic male, about 5'7" tall, aged about 60, and had a large moustache. I then said, I'd like 20 Richmond as well, please, the cheap ones. The male behind the counter said, 1 packet, you have cash, they're £5. I confirmed I had cash, and he then said something to his colleague in a foreign Arabic sounding language who was working to the rear of the premises, out of sight. His colleague then bought 3 packets of Richmond cigarettes to the front of the shop. He handed 2 of them to the man in front of me in the queue and 1 to me. I took the packet of cigarettes and left the shop. The packet he handed me on this occasion was a 20 packet of Richmond king size cigarettes. It had dark blue, light blue and white packaging. It had English writing on it, but no UK duty paid stamp or anything that would inform me that the duty had been paid. That exhibit of the second packet of cigarettes is SAT/2. I would say I was in the store no longer than 5 minutes. There was another staff member present when I was served, and he was working out of sight at the rear of the shop. Apart from the 2 people in front of me, I had a clear and unobstructed view of the shopkeeper, but I couldn't see whereabouts from the rear of the store the cigarettes were bought up from, due to the rear of it being secured by that curtain again. When he sold me the cigarettes, there was about 3 meters between us, and the male who served me was present in the shop during my last visit. I recognised him as the male who brought the cigarettes into me from the rear of the shop before, and I would describe him as being a light-skinned Arabic male in his late 20s to early 30s, of slim build, and he had short black hair and a beard. He was wearing a red t-shirt and black jeans, and he wasn't wearing a name badge, and he sounded like he might have been Arabic. A few days later, we were back at the shop again on Wednesday, the 25th of November. Myself and PC Brian reattended to conduct a third test purchase. We arrived at the shop at 12:30, just after midday, and PC Brian waited outside in the car. So I went inside. There were a number of people in the queue in front of me, still no mask being worn by anyone in the shop other than myself, and there was no screen up between the sales assistant and the customers on the counter. The male behind the counter, the same male who served me the first time I conducted the test purchase, seemed to recognise me, and he asked me, "Do you want cigarettes?" So I said, "Yes, I'd like a packet of Regal, please." And he spoke into the counter too, but he spoke in an Arabic language. His colleague then brought numerous packets of cigarettes to the front of the shop from the room behind the green curtain. He handed them out to people in the queue in front of me, and I took one. I took a packet of cigarettes. I paid £5 cash for them, and this colleague who was working there was the same guy who I'd seen on my previous 2 visits. The packet he handed me was a 20 packet of Regal king-size cigarettes. They have dark packaging with a picture of 2 sets of human lungs, and it had English writing on it, but no UK duty paid stamp or anything that would inform me the duty had been paid. I hereby exhibit the second, this would be the third packet of cigarettes as SAT3. I would say I was in the store no longer than 5 minutes. The shop was busier than it had been on my 2 previous visits, and I had a clear and unobstructed view of the shopkeeper and clearly saw his colleague bringing the cigarettes out from the room at the rear of the store. I didn't hear a noise consistent with the cigarettes being dropped down a chute on this occasion. When he sold me the cigarettes, there was about 4 meters between us. And I had seen the male before, as he'd served me previously, and I would recognise him. I then go on to describe the chap behind the counter. There's a light-skinned Arabic male, late 20s, early 30s, of slim build, short black hair, and was clean shaven. He was wearing on this occasion a black jumper, and he wasn't wearing a name badge, and he spoke in a language with an accent I believe to be Arabic. We then went back. So I was in the company of my council colleague Louise Faulkner on Wednesday, the 2nd of December. I was in plain clothes. Louise and I were out doing the joint visits within the town centre, and at 23:20 that evening, I attended UK Monopole convenience store. We had received information that they were selling illegally sourced cigarettes, and we also had reason to believe that between the hours of 11 p.m. and midnight, the venue was selling alcohol illegally outside of their trading hours. I was tasked to conduct a test purchase at the shop, and that evening I entered the shop at 23:20. There was the usual 2 male members of staff present and no customers in the store. I recognised both males from my previous visits to the shop as staff who worked there. I asked the male behind the counter, "Do you have any wine?" He said yes, and pointed to the display on the shelves behind the counter. So I said I'd like some cheap cigarettes too. He then spoke in a foreign language that sounded Arabic to his colleague, who was stood at the rear of the shop by the green curtain covering the back storeroom. And his colleague went to the back room. I made my way to the fridges to the left of the counter as you face it, and I selected 1 bottle of San Miguel 330 milliliter lager with an alcohol content of 5% volume. I placed it on the counter, and the male who served me looked at his watch and said, "We only have the license until 11 o'clock. I shouldn't really sell this to you." So I said, "Oh, it's past 11:20. I don't want you to get into any trouble." So he then said, "It's okay, I'll sell to you." I thanked him and I paid with a £10 note, and he gave me £3.50 change. I stepped to the side and waited and watched what was happening. The male who had served me waited for his colleague to return. There was a doorway with a long dark green fabric curtain covering it. The male returned from the back room with a dark coloured packet of Regal cigarettes in his hand. He gave them to me. I thanked him and left the store. I then made my way back to my colleague, Mrs. Faulkner, who was waiting outside. The packet he handed me was a packet of 20 Regal cigarettes with a dark brown, grey and white packaging with a smoking warning of a picture of the male without a top on a hospital bed being defibrillated. It had English writing on it, but no UK duty stamp paid. and anything that would inform me that it had been. I hereby exhibit the packet of cigarettes as SAT4 and the bottle of beer as SAT5. I would say I was in the shop no longer than 3 minutes. There were no other customers in the shop. I had a clear and unobstructed view of the shopkeeper. I couldn't see the whereabouts from the rear of the store the cigarettes were bought from, due to it being obscured by the green curtain. And when the chap sold me the cigarettes, there were about 3 meters between us. I had seen the male before, as he'd sold to me on previous test purchases, and I'd conducted on the shop, and I would recognise him again. So I then go on to describe him as a light-skinned Arabic man in his mid-20s, early 30s, of medium build, and he had short black hair and a beard, and he was wearing a dark top, no name badge, and he spoke with an Arabic accent. And then our final visit was on Friday, the 10th of December. Myself, PC Bryan, and a number of plainclothes officers from the police and from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, we attended the shop where I conducted a further test purchase for cigarettes. I was sold a further packet of non-duty paid cigarettes by the same 2 male members of staff who had made the previous sale of cigarettes on the 29th of the 10th, the 10th of the 11th, and the 25th of the 11th, 2020, and alcohol and cigarettes on the 2nd of December 2020. My police and HMRC colleagues then entered the premises under Section 180 of the Licensing Act 2003 and seized the non-duty paid cigarettes that were in the store. The seizure was made under the power of the Section 19 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, and a total of 260 cigarettes in various non-duty paid brands, including a number of banned menthol cigarettes, were located behind the counter. Both males who had been present and working at the shop during previous test purchasing operations were found to be working illegally, and that's subsequently found that one of them was, one of them wasn't, just for clarification. So this one particular gentleman was in breach of his conditions of entry into the UK. Contact details of the officers seizing the cigarettes were left at the premises, and the premises license holder, Mr. Zada, was spoken to on the phone by me that day. He was told what had happened at his shop and that enforcement action would follow. He confirmed to me that he understood what had been explained to him. The 2 males had been seen working at the premises each time police attended to conduct test purchasing procedures were Aras Sorket and Sam Hussain. Mr. Sorket was working, well, it transpired that he's not now. We were under the impression he was illegally working on his student visa, but that's subsequently found not to be the case. But Mr. Hussain was actually working illegally, as he's an asylum seeker, and that actually prevents him from being able to work or claim benefits in the UK. Both men denied that they were working at the shop and stated to police they were just helping out a friend. Neither of them were able to provide their friend's details or tell us their friend's location. So that concludes my statement. What's then happened subsequently is Mr. Zada has employed the services of Mr. Elford, and there's been, as you're aware, a long conversation, very productive conversation between the police and Mr. Elford, where we have come to an agreement, and we ask respectfully that the maximum term of suspension is put in place by yourselves. That will give Mr. Zada the chance to put his house in order. We did conduct a visit at the premises today, and none of the staff that have been present there previously were present today. So it seems like things are already being put in place to make things, to improve things there. The decision is yours. We're quite content with the progress that we've made prior to the hearing today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you very much. Now, Martin, who would you like to be speaking next? You are running this really from the point of view of the license and the police. Who would you like to speak next? Would you like Mr. Elford?
You or none of your colleagues have got any further questions of PC Tracy, then an opportunity for Mr. Elford or Mr. Zada, but if Mr. Elford on his behalf to speak and go from there.
fine. Let's just sign that. Councillor Bearsworth, Councillor Larratt, have you any questions for PC Tracy?
I have one, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Where the store is situated, it is opposite the new academy school, which takes children from early age until 18, I believe. Was there any evidence that many of the children use this store? Because that would be a great concern to me.
I have to be honest with you, I've got quite a good recollection of my visits there, and I don't ever recall school children being inside the shop.
Thank you.
Is that all right, Sally?
That's fine.
Thank you. Phil, any questions that you want to ask?
No, nothing from me. A comprehensive statement, Chair. Happy
Thank
with
you.
that.
That's what I thought. Fine. Who now, Mr. Elford? Would you like him next, Martin, or would you like Mr. Zard?
Yes, yeah, I think it's time for them to give their submission and anything they want to say.
Okay, so Mr. Elford, you first.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Luke Elford. I am the solicitor for Mr. Zardar, representing him this evening. He is also with me and he's present. Councillors, can I just check? I think I heard you say that you have all the documents and you've read them. I just want to check that includes the documents we submitted. That is the case summary, proposed outcome, Mr. Zardar's witness statement and exhibits. Can I just check that you have all those?
Well, I don't know about the others, but I have the proposed outcome and I have the witness statement of Mr. Zardar, yes.
Okay, and do you have my case summary too?
Not that I can see anywhere, unless it's part of the bulk of papers. This is what I have for the proposed outcome on there.
Chair, if I may,
Yes,
the email that Maisie sent you this morning contained 4 items.
Right.
And those are the 4 items that Mr. Elford is referring to.
Well, I have review of the premises license. That's what I have. I don't know about the others. The witness statement and the proposed outcome. I don't have anything else that I can see, unless it's in here. Councillor Bearsworth, Phil, have you got any extra other than those 2?
There were some things sent this morning, Chair, which I perused quickly, yes.
Phil? You're on mute, Phil.
I haven't been on my emails today, Chair, so I've got no emails from today at all.
There is one sent by Maisie to the 3 of you at 11:55 this morning. Has 4 items attached to it.
Yeah.
Mr. Efford, are you happy if we go ahead with having seen the witness statement by Mr. Zardar and the proposed outcome?
That's absolutely fine, councillors. What I'll do is I'll take you through my case summary rather than sort of skim over it, which is what I was hoping to do. And we'll go that way. Before I do that, though, first and foremost, I want to thank PC Tracy and PC Brian for the pragmatic way that they've approached this application. They've been extremely receptive to discussion with me on behalf of the premises licence holder, and also they've been understanding and accepting in respect of the explanations that we have offered for the things that have occurred at the premises. They've said to you that they're content to work with the premises licence holder moving forwards, and I hope that will drastically reduce the amount of evidence that you need to hear. Just to take you through the way we see this on behalf of Mr. Zardar, he took over the premises in July, the 1st of July last year. And prior to that, the premises licence holder was a chap called Mr. Shaho Rahman Abdullah. When my client took over the premises, it was agreed that Shaho Rahman Abdullah would remain as the designated premises supervisor. That was because Mr. Zardar at that time didn't have a personal licence and was in the process of obtaining one from his local licensing authority. We accept all of the test purchases took place, and we accept that the sales were made as described very fairly by PC Tracy. And we accept all of that. The only thing that we don't accept, and in fairness to PC Tracy, she's acknowledged this, is that Mr. Shawkett was an illegal worker. And if you look, when you have a moment, at the exhibit to Mr. Zardar's witness statement, you will see a copy of Mr. Shawkett's right to work in the UK, which clearly says work permitted. In respect of the other gentleman, Mr. Hussain, our case is that we've never employed Mr. Hussain. If he has undertaken work, be that paid or unpaid at the premises, it's not been through us. He may have been taken on by Mr. Abdullah or Mr. Shawkett. We don't know. He's disappeared into the ether. To put some context on this, between July, when he took over the premises, and when he was notified in December, Mr. Zardar wasn't at the premises, and he wasn't at the premises because he had a very serious knee injury that resulted in him having an operation in November. Prior to the operation, he just couldn't get about. He wasn't mobile, couldn't drive, couldn't use public transport. And during that time, he basically allowed Mr. Abdullah and Mr. Shawkett to de facto run the premises on his behalf. He has been let down incredibly badly by them. And as you've heard, they're gone. Following a period of recuperation and following the notification by the police, Mr. Zardar did take immediate action to investigate what was happening at the premises, and he realised that he had a problem. He doesn't want to lose his premises licence, and he accepts all of the things that were said by the police, except for the illegal working. And he's identified, with my help, ways to deal with those issues. The police application sought revocation of the premises licence. That's no longer the case, and they've been extremely fair in listening to Mr. Zardar's side of the story. So what we have done with the police is we've worked very hard to come up with the document that we call proposed outcome. And I think it's probably helpful if I take you through what the measures that we're asking you to put in place are. And I'll just go through those very, very briefly. The first is as you've heard from PC Tracy, that the premises licence will be suspended for a period of 3 months. And there are two reasons for that. First, it allows Mr. Zardar to get in place all of the other measures that are set out in that proposed outcome. And secondly, and I suppose from the police or from a council perspective, that acts as a deterrent to other licence holders who are engaged in or who might be thinking of engaging in similar activities. And under the guidance, you are entitled to make a decision that deters others from taking part in that kind of behaviour. The DPS, Mr. Abdullah, is to be removed from his position, and that's entirely appropriate and proportionate for you to do that. I can't think of any circumstances under which you would allow him to remain. In respect of our replacing the DPS, we want to involve the police in that process. Very briefly, it is exceptionally difficult for the police to object to an application to add a DPS. We want to engage with the police outside of that process and for them to meet and speak to our proposed DPS before we make any application to add him or her to the licence. And we don't have anyone particular in mind at the moment, but when we do, and all being well, we will contact the police to discuss that with them. We've proposed conditions banning all of those who we believe and the police believe to have been involved in these matters. So Shaho Rahman Abdullah, Aras Shaukat, and Sam Rayan Hussain will be banned from the premises. They won't be allowed to come into the premises. We've also looked at the existing conditions of the premises license, and it's fair to say that some of them are a tad aspirational in nature and could do with a rewrite. So we've rewritten those, and we've also offered significant additional conditions, and these additional conditions are specific and they are targeted at the matters of concern that were explained in the police's review application. So, for example, there is a concern about illegal working at the premises. We've proposed a condition that the licence holder is going to have to keep a register of his workers with photographic evidence at the premises to show the police or any other responsible authority who comes in and asks to see it. And that will allow them to check whether the staff are working legally or illegally. And you'll have seen that we've already been keeping those. We were already keeping those details anyway, because that's how we had Mr. Shaukat's residence permit. Each of those conditions is no more and no less than what is appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objectives. Mr. Zardar's absolutely committed to making this work, and one of the things he is going to do is he's going to employ an external company to come and test the regimes and the practices that he's going to put in place. The external company is going to be paid for by Mr. Zardar, but they will report back to the council and the police regarding what they find, and that is, of course, in addition to any test purchase operations conducted by the police or your trading standards team, or of course any other responsible authority. Suspension of the license allows these things to be bedded in during a period when alcohol can't be sold. Of course, it is a matter for you and it's entirely your decision, but provided that the proposed outcome we are suggesting in partnership with the police is ratified, Mr. Zardar is happy to fix the dates of the suspension so that everyone, the council, the police, and Mr. Zardar is clear when that starts and when that finishes. Because one of the problems that often happens with license reviews is that you have a period following the decision being published when someone can appeal. The suspension doesn't come into effect until the end of that time to appeal. If someone appealed, that suspension doesn't come into effect at all. We understand that the suspension is appropriate and proportionate, and we're happy to fix it in time. I hope that's a sufficient overview of what's being proposed. Just a couple of general comments. Mr. Zardar is genuinely remorseful for what has happened and wants to put it right. We've explained the circumstances as to how this came about. We're not going to sit here and moan and complain. It was bad luck, but he should have done more than he did. We want to look ahead. We want to focus on ensuring that when the business is able to sell alcohol again, that it does so in a way that promotes the licensing objectives at all times. Respectfully, we ask that you adopt, as you see fit, the proposed outcome as your decision this evening. Happy to assist you with any questions you may have, but those are, in very brief order, my submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Elford. Councillor Larrick, Councillor Bidsworth, do you have any questions for Mr. Elford? Could you put your hand up if you've got a question? Sally? You're on mute, of course, at the moment.
I was trying to unmute myself in the wrong place, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to ask, it sounds very conciliatory at the moment, Mr. Eldridge, but I just wanted to know, all these people that were serving behind the shop and the customers seem to know that cheap cigarettes could be bought there. It wasn't just the officer buying, but other people going in. I know the one for selling alcohol was just a one-off, but if it's a one-off, it happens again. So surely there should have been some sort of mechanism to stop this happening. I have grave concerns about cigarettes that come into this country illegally, because we don't always know what's in them, and they can cause huge damage to people's health, apart from normal smoking. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit about what oversight the owner had over all this.
Yes, simply put, no oversight. Mr. Zardar was in Bournemouth. He couldn't leave his house or move very far. He had significant problems with his knee that resulted in an operation that took place in November. Since then, he's been recuperating. He's now back on his feet, but undergoing physio. He has taken it upon himself to move closer to the premises, to be closer to it. Effectively, he trusted Mr. Abdullah and Mr. Shawkat to run things on his behalf between July and when he was notified in December. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. It's entirely accepted that there was significant wrongdoing on their part. It's accepted that Mr. Zardar should have had more involvement, even though it was difficult for him to do so. But he is doing all the right things to put that right moving forwards. If you, when you have a moment, look at the proposed outcome, you'll see that some of the conditions deal with things like training his staff to make sure that they understand the difference between duty paid and non-duty paid cigarettes. There's already been a root and branch review, and as you've heard, the staff that were engaged in these activities, they're just no longer there. They're gone.
Thank you. Is that all right, Sally?
I'll just ask one more then. Why was there no protection for the staff in the way of a screen? And why weren't people wearing masks? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Surely these sort of things should have been mandatory in a shop.
Yes, so they're not mandatory, first and foremost. Masks became mandatory later in the year. I would have to go away and check exactly when that was. There are signs on the door that ask customers to wear masks. And I don't know if PC Tracy can help with that. She visited today. Perhaps you could say there is a sign on the door that asks people to wear masks. The screen there, what you could do, my understanding under the coronavirus regulations, was if you had a screen, then your staff didn't have to wear a mask. But that subsequently changed and staff now have to wear masks. And I visited the shop myself last week. All the staff were wearing masks. Everyone was wearing a mask. A lot of people don't feel comfortable challenging customers as to why they're not wearing a mask. And in fact, it can create conflict when they do so. Look, we accept that their PC Tracy saw people not wearing a mask, but broadly speaking, I think the premises is doing what it can in respect of coronavirus.
Thank you.
Can I just butt in there, please, Chair? Just in relation to our visit today, all the staff in there were wearing masks today.
Great. Thank you very much, Tracy. Phil, have you got any questions, please?
I fully, just on that point, I feel businesses have great difficulty in enforcing the mask regulations, and I sympathise that it does cause conflict and it does cause tension if you try to enforce it. And I think it's a shame, and I think the police should be a bit more proactive in visiting some of our stores where this is happening so that they can put their marker on it. I mean, Kingsley Front is very few people wearing masks in shops, particularly later at night when people go out shopping. And the same with Tesco's on Wellingborough Road. Clearly signs up say masks mandatory, but people don't wear them, and staff do feel difficult about refusing to serve people. And I've actually seen somebody who was challenged for not wearing a mask in Waitrose, got really nasty shouting and abusive. So I do sympathise with the staff in shops on enforcement of the rule. But I do think that there is, I hear that the staff are wearing masks, but I have to say there's very few retail, if any, retail premises that I go into these days where there isn't some sort of screen behind which people serving are safe and secure. I can't really think of a shop that hasn't got some sort of perspex screen, albeit only small, but where the staff are actually at the till or whatever. So, I do think that should really be considered. My only sort of question is, we're still talking about alcohol not being for sale during part of the opening times, if I've got this correct. So there will still be alcohol on display when it can't be purchased. Is there any way that alcohol could be screened so that it's obvious that alcohol is not for sale after 11 o'clock at night or whatever? I mean, when you go into stores, I think it's more over Easter. I think Good Friday is one of those funny days where alcohol gets screened. Can the alcohol not have some sort of screen in front of it that can be drawn across at 11 o'clock at night to hide it from the public? So there is a clear intention that there's no alcohol for sale, and that anybody coming in after 11 o'clock can clearly see that, and there probably wouldn't be any conflict with somebody trying to buy alcohol being refused and then trouble transpiring as a result of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. I think Martin has a comment to make about that.
Yeah, it wasn't said in his comments, but it is in the proposal that the hours would be changed for the alcohol sale hours to be knocked back in line with the opening hours. I think that's correct, is it not, Mr. Elford?
Yes,
The
exactly.
other way around, actually, it's the we're allowed to open later than we are allowed to sell alcohol.
Yes, yeah.
We want to bring the opening hours down so there can be no confusion. I think you're right, Councillor. If the opening hours stayed as they were, then we would have had to look at screens or something like that. But we just want to shut the shop at 11 p.m. so that there can be no more misunderstandings, and what happened with PC Tracy can't happen again.
Yeah, sorry, that is the way around I meant, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Please, could I make a comment on that?
To ask you if you've got anything to say.
Thank you. Could it be considered as well that during the period of suspension that there is no alcohol on the shop floor where the public have access, that during the suspension period the alcohol is secured away from the shop floor? We've had, and I'm not suggesting that they would, but we've had incidents in the past where we've had licenses suspended and the alcohol's been stored behind a sheet in the shop, which has been easily accessible.
That's absolutely fine from our perspective. We will make sure it comes off the shelves and goes out into the storerooms out the back.
Thank you
Very much. I think one of the things that I wanted to know, which has kind of been sort of skimmed over rather, Mr. Zada took over on 1st of July. Two things. First of all, I don't know whether Mr. Elford, you need to tell us this, or whether we can ask Mr. Zada. What was his relationship with Mr. Abdullah at that time?
So it was the relationship of someone purchasing a business from someone selling it. Mr. Abdullah wanted to get rid of the business, wanted to move on. But
Sorry to interrupt you, but one can only assume, as Mr. Zada left Mr. Abdullah there, that they were somehow friends, they knew each other. That's really what I'd like to know.
not friends, business acquaintances. Mr. Abdullah agreed as part of the purchase to stay on and be DPS at the premises. It was an employer-employee relationship. Mr. Abdullah was paid for his he's paid for the business, and then he was paid for his service thereafter. But they're not friends.
No, well, that's fine as far as I could, but the reason I'm asking is because if one of the conditions that you are saying Mr. Zada will accept is that Mr. Abdullah, Mr. Shawkat will not be allowed near the premises, and yet they are business friends, I really think we need to know precisely the relationship between Mr. Zada, Mr. Abdullah, and Mr. Shawkat.
The relationship between Mr. Zada and Mr. Abdullah is that he purchased the business from Mr. Abdullah. Mr. Abdullah subsequently became an employee and worked at the premises as DPS from July until present. And should you be minded to, we hope that you're going to remove him as designated premises supervisor. He's not coming back. He's we don't want him anywhere near the premises. He has been involved in selling illegal cigarettes and breaching license conditions with Mr. Shawkat. Again, Mr. Shawkat was an employee. He's been sacked. He is not working for us anymore. We've hired completely new staff, and they're the people we'll be working with moving forwards.
Yes, fine. Thank you very much. One other thing, Mr. Zada is talking a lot, or he's mentioned a lot, and you have as well, about his injury. Could we please know exactly when that injury took place? I know he went into hospital in November, but presumably when he purchased on the 1st of July, these premises, he was able to walk around them, look at them. And so I'd like to know a bit more, please, of when he came up here, when he went down to Bournemouth. And it seems a little bit strange to me that he would buy the premises and then just disappear completely, and then now claiming that he was unable to come back again. So I'd like some information, please.
It was an arm's length transaction to purchase the premises. He had seen the premises, he'd seen the accounts. He didn't do much back and forth to Northampton from Bournemouth. It was a very long-standing knee injury. I understand that the original injury took place roughly 3 or 4 years ago, but it was one of those injuries where things get worse and worse and worse until such time as you're not able to do anything anymore. He was having surgery on the NHS, which meant he was on a waiting list, and he was struggling with mobility. He couldn't drive, couldn't get up to Northampton to be at the premises during the period July to December.
And Mr. Abdullah, presumably, did he never visit Mr. Zada to give him some indication of what was going on?
No, there was contact by telephone and text message and email, but Mr. Abdullah didn't come to Bournemouth and Mr. Zada didn't come to Northampton, and vice versa.
Thank you very much. Phil, Sally, have you got any more questions? Then I'll pass it over to Martin to see if he has anything else to say.
None for me, Chair.
Nothing from me, Penny.
Thank you very much, Martin. You're on mute, by the way.
Just to request to Mr. Zada and Mr. Elford. I guess Mr. Zada's change of location from Bournemouth nearer to Northampton, wherever that may be, is a permanent move, and it's his new address. If we could just make sure that in all this process we at some point get notification of his change of address, so that the licence can be updated if it remains fully with new details. I can send you the relevant form if you need it.
That's absolutely fine. Mr. Zada also needs to change the address on his personal licence, albeit that's not issued by you guys, it's issued by Bournemouth Council. So he's going to be doing those various bits of admin very shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. PC Tracy, have you got any more comments to make? Anything you wish to say?
No, thank you. No further comment. I'll leave the decision making up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Maisie, this is where I think just Councillor Larritt and Councillor Beardsley and myself need just to have a discussion.